They say revenge is best served cold. But in today's game, it doesn't come on ice. It comes live, raw, and unfiltered, broadcast straight to millions of screens. And at the center of it all is Sophie Cunningham. To most people, the headlines make it look simple. A fiery guard firing back at a loudmouth pundit. Just another athlete versus media squabble. But what if that's only the surface? What if the clash you saw wasn't just a feud, but the opening move in something much bigger? Because here's the truth. Sophie's battle wasn't really about Skip Bayless at all. He was never the true target. He was just the first domino, the first warning shot in a war she believes the entire system has been begging for. This isn't about a single insult. This isn't about one back-and-forth clip that goes viral. This is about a player who's furious, who feels betrayed, and who's ready to risk everything to call out the cracks in the league she loves. And the question isn't, what did Sophie Cunningham just do? The real question is, what is she planning next? It all started with a single insult. Skip Bayless, the so-called titan of hot take television, went on his show and did what he's done for decades. He dismissed, belittled, and labeled an athlete for clicks. His target this time? Sophie Cunningham. His accusation? That she was nothing more than a clout chaser, riding the popularity of her teammate, Caitlin Clark. For Skip, it was business as usual. Toss out a lazy jab, let the headlines stir, collect engagement, and move on to the next target. But this time, his playbook failed him spectacularly. Sophie didn't take the bait with anger. She didn't fire back with shouting or name-calling. Instead, she went colder, sharper. She turned to her own podcast, laid out the facts, and flipped the script in a way that cut deeper than any insult could. Her first strike was simple, but lethal. She asked him directly, "Skip, who's really chasing clout here? You're literally using my name as your headline so people will click on it." In one line, she exposed the hypocrisy. The man who built a career accusing athletes of attention-seeking was in fact the one desperate for their attention. But Sophie wasn't finished. That was just the jab. The knockout punch came next, and it was humiliating. She pointed out that the very YouTube video where Skip called her a clout chaser had a grand total of 36 views. 36. Not 36,000. 36. A man with a national platform, a multi-million-dollar brand, couldn't even break 40 clicks while trying to tear her down. One sentence from Sophie turned the whole narrative upside down. She wasn't chasing clout. He was. He needed her more than she needed him. And then she twisted the knife. She ended by saying what so many people had always thought but never said. That's all Skip Bayless has done his entire career. It wasn't just a comeback, it was a public execution. In that moment, Sophie didn't just defend herself, she dismantled a media giant. She proved she could turn a smear campaign into a stage for her own message. And while Skip was left scrambling, Sophie was already looking past him. Because this wasn't just about one man. This was about exposing a system. And the spark that began with Skip Bayless, that was only the beginning of a much bigger fire.
If Sophie's battle with Skip was entertainment, what happened next was anything but. Because this wasn't just words tossed around on a talk show. This was real, physical, painful, and it happened to someone Sophie considers family. Her teammate, Lexi Hull, had just endured one of the ugliest stretches you'll ever see on a basketball court. 2 brutal head injuries in the span of days left her with black eyes so dark and swollen that Sophie joked she looked like a character straight out of Avatar. One hit you could chalk up to bad luck, a hard collision with Gabby Williams, part of the game. But the second one, that was different. Against the Minnesota Lynx, after the whistle had already blown, Kayla McBride allegedly made an extra movement, an unnecessary swing of the elbow, and smashed Lexi right in the face. This wasn't defense. This wasn't hustle. This was violence. Sophie didn't sugarcoat it. She said it flat out. Way too much. A cheap shot. And yet, what did the referees, the supposed guardians of player safety, do? Did they call a flagrant? Toss her from the game? Protect the player who had just been struck? No. They handed out a technical foul, a slap on the wrist for an elbow to the face. For Sophie, that moment wasn't just about Lexi's injury. It was a revelation. The league, the officials, the system that's supposed to protect its athletes, it didn't care. It looked the other way. A player could take a blatant elbow to the face and the message was clear. You're on your own out there. And Sophie felt that betrayal cut deep. Because if the system won't protect her teammates from being assaulted in plain sight, what else is it ignoring? What else is it covering up? That was the moment Sophie's fight stopped being personal and started becoming something bigger. It wasn't just about clapping back at a pundit. It was about standing up against a system she believed was broken. And as she looked around, she realized Lexi wasn't the only victim. The betrayal was bigger. The pattern was spreading. And the next name on that list was Kelsey Mitchell. Lexi Hull's black eyes might have been the first betrayal. But Sophie didn't stop there, because what she saw happening to her teammate Kelsey Mitchell pushed her past anger into outright disbelief. If you ask Sophie, Kelsey Mitchell should be in the MVP conversation. Night after night, she's unstoppable, scoring, slashing, proving she's one of the best guards in the league. By all logic, she should be celebrated, protected, elevated as one of the faces of the WNBA. But instead, she's treated like an afterthought. The proof came in a moment Sophie still can't forget. Against Los Angeles, Kelsey Plum of the Aces literally grabbed Mitchell's arm and flung her around like a rag doll. The play happened right in front of the referee. Everyone in the arena saw it. Everyone watching at home saw it. And yet, the whistle never blew. No foul, no call, nothing. That silence was deafening. Because it wasn't just one missed whistle. Sophie believed it symbolized something bigger. Why does an MVP-level player, putting up career-best numbers, get treated like she doesn't matter? Why does she take hit after hit while other stars get bailed out by whistles at the slightest touch? It started to look less like incompetence and more like a pattern, a double standard.
Some players, Sophie suggested, are protected, shielded by the league's desire to market its chosen stars. Others, left out in the cold, ignored, punished with silence. And Kelsey Mitchell, despite her dominance, was being treated like she was invisible. Sophie voiced the question out loud, almost daring the league to answer. How are you not calling that? You're protecting all the other stars. Why would you not protect Kelsey? And here's where the conspiracy tone sharpened. If certain players are consistently overlooked, is it just bad officiating, or is it something deeper? Favoritism, a hidden blacklist, a quiet agenda shaping who gets the spotlight and who doesn't. For Sophie, the evidence was piling up. Lexi gets hit in the face and left bleeding with barely a penalty. Kelsey gets manhandled in front of a ref and gets nothing. And yet other stars get whistles if someone so much as breathes on them. This wasn't just sloppy officiating anymore. To Sophie, it was a league that played favorites, a system that decided who mattered and who didn't. And she wasn't about to sit quietly and accept that. Because the moment Sophie opened her mouth about these double standards, the league turned its focus not on fixing the problem, but on silencing her. Calling out Skip Bayless was one thing. Calling out referees and exposing double standards inside the league, that was another. Because unlike Skip, the WNBA had real power over Sophie, and they wasted no time using it. The first shot came quietly, a $500 fine. Her crime? Posting a TikTok where she criticized officiating. To most athletes, that might have been enough to send a warning: pay up, shut up, and move on. But Sophie? She laughed it off. Then came the second strike, a steeper $1,500 fine this time, for comments she made on the very first episode of her podcast. Again, the message was obvious: stop talking. The league wasn't even subtle about it. They were watching her, monitoring her, waiting for her to slip up so they could punish her again. And when she refused to stay quiet, they hit her a third time. Another undisclosed fine for comments about officiating during a game involving Paige Bookers. The details didn't matter. What mattered was the pattern. Each time Sophie spoke out, they made her pay. It wasn't about money, it was about control. The league's strategy was clear: silence through financial pressure, drain her pockets until the message was too expensive to repeat, make her weigh every word, make her question whether speaking the truth was worth the cost. But here's where they miscalculated. Sophie Cunningham doesn't play by those rules. She doesn't fear fines. She doesn't measure her words in dollars. Her response wasn't regret, it was defiance. On her podcast, she doubled down, saying, "You fining me $500 is not going to do shit. And then I'll get fined for that, and then I'll get fined for this, and the fines will continue." That wasn't a complaint. That was a declaration of war.
The league thought fines would silence her. Instead, they became fuel, proof that she was onto something real. Every dollar they took from her wallet only strengthened her case, that the WNBA would rather punish its players for speaking out than protect them on the court. And Sophie knew it. She wasn't backing down. She was daring them. Fine me again. Fine me bigger. Suspend me if you have to. She made it clear that her voice wasn't for sale and that exposing hypocrisy was worth more than any paycheck. The fines weren't shutting her up. They were proving her point. And that was far more dangerous to the league than anything she had said before. Because now it wasn't just about bad calls or favoritism, it was about a system openly trying to muzzle one of its own players. And Sophie wasn't just fighting back. She was turning it into evidence, a weapon she could use to rally others. And the deeper you look, the more obvious the pattern becomes. Skip Bayless, Lexi Hull, Kelsey Mitchell, now Sophie herself. Every move pointed back to the same conclusion. The league was built on hypocrisy. By now, the pieces were impossible to ignore. One player takes an elbow to the face, and the league looks the other way. Another dominates the floor night after night, yet gets treated like she's invisible. And when Sophie dares to point it out, the punishment isn't for the offenders, it's for her. This isn't random. This isn't coincidence. It's a pattern. A pattern Sophie has been tracing in public, one painful example at a time. Think about it. The WNBA talks constantly about player safety. They brand themselves as advocates, as protectors of the athletes who make the league possible. Yet when Lexi Hull left the court with her face bruised and swollen from a blatant elbow, what did the referees do? They called it a technical, not a flagrant, not an ejection, just a minor penalty, like it was nothing more than a shove after a whistle. That's not protection, that's neglect. The league also claims to celebrate excellence, to push its brightest stars into the spotlight. But then you watch Kelsey Mitchell, a guard playing at an MVP level, get grabbed, thrown, and hacked in plain sight without a single whistle. No respect, no recognition, no protection. How does that make sense? Unless, of course, the league has already decided which stars it wants to protect and which ones it's willing to ignore. And then there's the biggest hypocrisy of all: free speech. The league says it values voices, that it empowers players to speak their truth. But when Sophie Cunningham used her platform to point out what everyone could see, they didn't engage with her message. They didn't investigate the calls. They fined her again and again and again. That's not empowerment. That's censorship with a price tag. To Sophie, the contradictions couldn't be clearer. The WNBA says one thing and does another.
They talk about fairness, but don't call it fairly. They talk about safety, but let violence slide. They talk about valuing their players, but punish the ones who refuse to stay quiet. And here's the twist. Every time they try to silence Sophie, they only prove her right. Every fine is evidence. Every ignored foul is proof. Every empty slogan about player safety becomes another brick in the case she's building.
What started as a feud with Skip Bayless is now something much bigger. It's not about one insult, one elbow, or one missed whistle. It's about a system Sophie believes is rotting from the inside out. And if the league thought she'd be scared into silence, they misread her completely. Because Sophie's greatest weapon isn't her jump shot. It isn't her podcast. It's something far more dangerous. It's the fact that she simply does not care. Every league has its rules. Every system has its pressure points. For the WNBA, the usual tools of control are simple: money, reputation, and opportunity. Fines drain your wallet. Media pressure breaks your image. Silence keeps you safe. But Sophie Cunningham doesn't play by those rules, and that's exactly what makes her so dangerous. Her superpower isn't her shooting, her grit, or even her podcast microphone. It's that she simply does not give a damn. Not about the fines, not about the headlines, not about whether her words make the league uncomfortable. Most players weigh every word carefully, afraid of what might come next. Sophie? She leans into the chaos. Fine her $500? She laughs. Fine her $1,500? She doubles down. Threaten to fine her again? She dares you. It's not defiance for show. It's genuine indifference to the punishment. And that indifference strips the league of its greatest weapon. Because how do you silence someone who isn't afraid of losing money? How do you control a player who doesn't care about access, approval, or popularity? How do you stop someone who's willing to burn her own paycheck to expose what she believes is broken? That's Sophie's edge. That's her leverage. She doesn't crave the approval of executives or media hacks. She craves fairness for her teammates. She wants a league where Lexi Hull doesn't leave the floor with black eyes and no justice, where Kelsey Mitchell gets the call she's earned, where players don't have to swallow their words just to keep the peace. And that's the secret. While the league is counting dollars, Sophie is counting principles. While the league tries to silence her voice, she's proving that her voice is the one thing they can't buy, muzzle, or bury. Her superpower isn't invincibility, it's fearlessness. And that's something no fine, no punishment, no campaign of silence can ever erase. Which is why the battle with Skip Bayless was never the end game. That was just a warm-up, the practice run, the test. Because now, Sophie has set her sights on a far bigger opponent. And this time, she isn't just fighting for herself, she's fighting for the soul of the league. Skip Bayless was just a warm-up, a single man with a microphone exposed and humiliated in front of his own audience. That battle was won quickly, cleanly, decisively. But what Sophie faces now makes Skip look like a footnote. Because her next opponent isn't one person, it's an entire institution. The WNBA isn't just a league, it's the gatekeeper of careers, reputations, and livelihoods. And Sophie knows exactly what it means to stand against it. Every fine, every headline, every attempt to muzzle her is proof that the league sees her as a threat. And threats, if they aren't silenced, have a way of becoming revolutions.
So, where does this go from here? Will the WNBA escalate, raise the fines from hundreds to thousands, suspend her if she doesn't fall in line, maybe even try to make an example of her? Each move they make carries risk, because every attempt to shut her down doesn't erase her voice, it amplifies it. It makes her case stronger. It tells every fan, every teammate, every rival exactly what Sophie has been saying all along. The system fears the truth. And that's the danger, because the more they push, the less this stays about Sophie alone. Other players are watching. Some quietly agree with her even if they don't say it out loud. Others feel the same frustration about officiating, about favoritism, about a league that claims empowerment but punishes dissent. The question isn't whether Sophie Cunningham will keep fighting, she's already made that clear. The question is whether her fight sparks something bigger. Will teammates rally behind her? Will other stars decide they've had enough of double standards? Will one player's revenge tour transform into a movement that forces the WNBA to face its own reflection? Because here's the truth. Sophie's not fighting for headlines anymore, she's fighting for principle. And in sports, principles have a way of catching fire. Skip Bayless was just one man, easily defeated. The WNBA is an empire, and Sophie Cunningham has already drawn her line in the sand. The war isn't coming, the war has already started. So where does this all end? With Sophie Cunningham sitting quietly in the corner, afraid to speak her mind? Not a chance. With the league finally realizing that silencing its players only exposes its cracks? Maybe. Or with something even bigger, a player-led rebellion that forces the WNBA to confront its own reflection. Because here's what makes this story different. Sophie's not chasing clout. She's not chasing headlines. She's chasing fairness. And in a system that has shown her nothing but double standards, that pursuit of fairness looks a lot like war. The takedown of Skip Bayless was never the story. That was the prologue, the practice round, the spark that showed Sophie and the rest of us how much power one voice can have when it refuses to stay silent. Now her fight has shifted from one man to an entire institution, and every move the league makes, every ignored foul, every selective whistle, every fine that lands on her desk only fuels her case, only proves her point, only adds weight to her rebellion. So ask yourself this. When one player is fearless enough to risk her career, her money, her reputation, what happens when others decide to follow? Will Sophie Cunningham's stand remain a one-woman war? Or are we witnessing the first shot in a revolution that could change the WNBA forever?